Welcome to ShamRockin, the show that uncovers what's moving, breaking, shaking, or bottlenecking in the manufacturing world. Today, we want to talk about AI a bit more. Last time, we were joined by Brian Lawson, a former Procter exec, to discuss trends with AI. And I'd highly recommend if you haven't seen that particular podcast, it's a couple weeks old now. By all means, go back. It's still up. It's still posted. So take a gander at it. He comes up with some great ideas in there. Today, we want to take more of an overview and just provide some additional perspective that we hope you find interesting. And of course, if you do, as always, but feel free to subscribe at the end. So today, I'm joined by Glenn Career, another Shamrocker, to discuss AI perspectives. Welcome in, Glenn.
So great to be here with you, John. Always enjoy our conversations. Glad to be here on the ShamRockin podcast.
Awesome. Yeah. So I know we're hearing about AI, and I'm interested in getting your perspective on it. It seems like, every meeting, quite frankly, everywhere you go, you can't even go out to dinner anymore without somebody talking about AI. And, I kind of joke if I had a dollar for every time I've heard AI, I'd be probably one of the richest people on this planet. So I think today we're not here to hype AI. We're not here to put it down. We're here to just provide some hopefully helpful perspective.
Yeah, I think thinking about AI as a tool as opposed to a magic solution is where you see the most successful people in deploying it. It really has some great use cases, like you talked about with Brian in the last Shamrocking episode. But we want to make sure that in our discussion today, we're highlighting where you can deploy it and where you might want to pull back and consider the applications of AI before you deploy it full scale.
You see it a lot in your day-to-day life, yes, I think.
It comes up quite a bit. There's a lot of people who are looking for it as the next big thing, and it really does have some wonderful things. One of the things that came up when you were talking with Brian is how it can serve as an analytical tool and really put the analysis of data in the forefront of giving your people their time back. But if we do not have the checks and balances for it, it's really going to put us in a position, and we're seeing this happen at astronomical cost to some of our large companies out there when we decided that we are rolling it out to be on the cutting edge without sharpening it as a tool. No good chef does not sharpen their knives, and so we need to make sure we're sharpening AI.
Awesome. So if you don't mind, we can kind of jump into some of the thoughts around AI today.
I'm seeing its application in so many industries, but diving into the manufacturing piece, I think is so fascinating, especially in how it's going to be helping our people both at the supervisory level and the managerial level and our frontline employees. And I'm curious, we talked a little bit about this on the last episode, but where are some examples where you see AI genuinely making someone's job easier?
I think that's a great question because, we work a bit in the training world, and I think in training, and if you just think about just specifically, I was thinking about machine training and machine training applications. So over the years, a great deal of the training material has been lost or is difficult to narrow down quickly. I think there's a gap there, and I think that AI helps kind of people with that gap. If you can be specific about what you're looking for. So I'm looking for how to train on like I said, a DOZ. I'm just making up a name of a piece of equipment. You can very quickly get training materials on that particular piece of information, or that piece of equipment. Also, just materials for safety training or other employee compliance type initiatives.
Yeah, I think in addition to get the minestrone off of the SOPs that are in the building, I think it can be helpful for data synthesis and working through any blocks you have when it comes to problem solving. Using AI as a starting point to think about like the concept of writer's block when it comes to either strategic or tactical
Exactly.
initiatives, I think is a really great starting place. But if you rely on it and you do not have that human element checking and double checking it, we are losing the opportunity to leverage the experience in the plants that are there, and also the impact on the culture. Because if people are saying my time doesn't feel as valuable to my manager as something that gets pumped out in 30 seconds, the morale is going to plummet. But if you're using it as an opportunity to say, hey, use this tool in order to collect your thoughts and then really make sure that it's your perspective enhanced by the AI tool, I think that's where we're looking at AI as something that makes productivity and engagement go up, as opposed to really pushing productivity in a way that feels oppressive at sometimes and declining engagement with the culture.
That's a great point, Glenn. You just hit on something, you know, bravo, that I think is fantastic is, it's when you use the term writer's block. And I think if somebody's looking to do a training or looking to try and spice things up in their particular group or their particular plant or their particular organization, if it's a small enough organization, and, it does provide a start. We use it for starts. We'll have it map, just out like 5 or 6 sentences for us. And then we take those 5 or 6 sentences and we could turn it into a training platform. Yeah, you want to be careful. I've had people give me presentations that were completely done by AI, and it just comes across kind of stale and phony, really. That's, you could spot it instantly, versus using it to augment a good idea, to take well, here's an idea I have. How can I turn that into a small presentation? And AI can do that for you. I think, other good ways to keep it from just being a buzzword, like I said, we hit on this in the last section, was around its ability to organize data. I think that's a critical piece, so, we mentioned the safety piece, and if folks didn't utilize it for that, for like the safety observations, I think Brian said he used it for, but just for also, just finding patterns. So, frequently with safety, we're looking for what we call pinch points or, troubled areas. And AI can very easily do a measle diagram for you, is what we used to call it, where it shows a bunch of trouble areas or a bunch of doorways or things of that nature that might cause you trouble. So it can really be a way of keeping you, again, from having to dig through or even look for all those old books, right? So yeah, I think it definitely has some good applications out there.
And I'm really glad we're talking about safety, John, because when I came onto the team 9 years ago, we're knocking on the door to 10, if you can believe it. It became something that I internalized because of the human element and how you and I talked about it. If we look at safety as only being observed through AI, I loved Brian's point about the prompt saying, look at this as an EHS manager, but we need to have that human touch on it because there's an additional step when we're using AI as a tool. And if we push something like speed over accuracy and safety, we're completely disengaging with the value of safety that we teach at the plants, that we teach internally, and that is an industry wide standard. Having the checks and the double checks and not ignoring that human element, because you and I have talked about this. Policies and procedures are great, but culture is human behavior driven. And if we miss that piece when we start looking at meeting our KPIs when it comes to our safety numbers and outcomes, we're going to completely miss that culture piece. And you nailed it on the head. As we integrate AI into our lives more often, people are going to be able to spot very subconsciously when something is purely AI and it hasn't been used to enhance something, but it's really overwritten the work. And that's when we're going to see outcomes that we have no interest in seeing in any plant.
I'm glad you brought that up even as well. We won't get into some of the personal lessons we've all learned, with safety. But that's really, I think, how you learn safety, for example. I think I used to tell this story that I remembered going to and watching at least, I think the number was at least 600 safety videos when I would visit various sites. And I couldn't tell you anything from any one of those 600 videos. As we're sitting here right now, I literally cannot recall one single piece of it. But to your point, I think that real application, maybe those 2 or 3 conversations that you and I had, or those 2 and 3, conversations that, I had with somebody else from the group, those stick out a lot more, in my head. Not only do, hopefully you remember them, It sounds like you do, but I
I
remember,
surely do.
right? And it's a reminder to me. Like one of them is, hand touch on rails, right? When you're in a site, and literally, it makes it then pop in my head. That's the way the psychology piece of this works. Having had the conversations, when I go downstairs, I'm thinking about it consciously and subconsciously every time I go down a set of stairs now. And like I said, I think there can be some negative aspects to AI as well, right? So
Mm.
that's something that
Yeah, I'm
people
curious,
want.
Sean. Yeah, what do you see as the big traps when it comes to AI as it's being deployed in manufacturing facilities?
Great point. One of the ones that just jumps out at me, and I just can't help it, is making people choices. So people choices can be subjective or objective, we like to say. And I think what happens is, again, AI is a tool, and it will go based on what you personally, you the individual, a million different individuals watching this, right? Each one of you, what you enter into it, what information you give it, versus external information, and that's very dangerous. Some of my all-time favorite stories have been what I refer to as reclamation projects, right? Where someone said, "Hey, this particular leader, Bob Jones or Mary Smith, those aren't real people, but they don't belong in our organization. We're going to get them out of here." And then, 3 months later, they're rock stars. We had that personal bias in the beginning. They were different than us, and if you get into the psychology of that, it's extremely dangerous.
When we're using a tool like AI to assess others, and it's summarizing down whether we're no matter what kind of resource we're pumping in there, whether it's the scenarios we've seen them, previous reviews. I think there's an opportunity, especially as a leader who is using business and leadership humility to subject ourselves to the process as well and see what comes out and how it lands with us. Because if we're going to start delivering that information and making decisions on that information, we should have a an opportunity to see what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that. And I would even encourage people, as difficult as this is, and this lets you know when we're working with any tool, many tools are very helpful, but there is a danger in using them. A hammer can build and a hammer can hurt. But giving that information to people and seeing what about this rings true for you as somebody who's worked for me for X amount of time. Let me tell you a little bit about what landed with me. Is this something I could be working on? Or does this feel flat out inaccurate? And so thinking about AI as a tool that can do a lot of creation, but also there's fear out there about the concept of AI. And we've seen areas in which it can hurt. How do we build self awareness to have it serve well as the tool it is?
Well, a couple thoughts. Again, you hit on a couple different things there, Glenn. And one is, a phrase that I have is that AI is like TPM or SAP or anything else. I mean, plugged in by themselves, they're technically of little or no help, unless you have the right application set for it. And then when you talk about how do we get to, that self-awareness point, that's a great question. We're working on a tool called RI. And I think the first time I said it, folks thought I was making a bad joke about AI, but RI is real intelligence, and real intelligence is based on the concept around bringing and teaching someone critical thinking skills so that they're able to parse out the priorities and then be able to ask the right questions based off of what input and feedback they have versus just a personal bias. And you're going to see 3 and 4 times the accuracy that you would with AI. AI is kind of taking a shot in the dark unless you have a plan for it. It's just like I said, the same thing with TPM. How do you use TPM to tie into your business and your business needs? How do you use SAP to tie into your business needs? I had a potential customer who, sought some advice, and I'm glad they did. They were going to use SAP, went toward their facility. And after about 2 hours, said, SAP would be the worst thing that you could do. I think SAP is a fantastic tool, but
Agreed.
if they had spent the couple hundred thousand plus dollars they were going to spend on SAP, I think it would have been an absolute complete disaster. Not only would they have not gotten a ROI on that, in other words. So, it, and the point being is if you use RI, which is our tool, yeah, I think you're going to see things much clearer than you might with just plugging something in.
John, in our years of working together, you're somebody who I've seen uh, extend an a extraordinarily healthy amount of skepticism towards technology and how it gets implemented, particularly when it comes to that culture piece. But we're seeing these upsides. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what's one thing you wish more people understood about AI and its use cases before they jump in and start applying it, particularly to manufacturing practices?
I think that's a great question, and that ties a little bit into what I was saying. I think it's tying it into what's their business need. So if you anytime you're going to use any tool, this is this might sound like I always call it the obvious advice, but it's the obvious advice that literally 95% of people out there, 19 out of 20 of them aren't following, which is to tie the tools into your business need. The person who, presented me with the SAP idea, for example, Ivy League educated, very intelligent guy, just taking advice that, hey, maybe this tool, if I plug this tool in, it'll clean up my mess for me. Yeah, that's a prayer. That's not, tying it into your business. It's really sitting down, slowing down, and saying, okay, what is it as a business we're trying to do? I frequently ask that question around TPM. I hear so many people today, for example, if you don't know, it's total productive maintenance or total productive manufacturing. Toyota made it famous about 45 years ago. Unilever, Procter, other large companies have utilized it. And that's the very first question I ask folks, CEOs, and it stumps them, which is, why do you want to use TPM? They're like, oh, it's a great tool. And I'm like, sure, it's a great tool. Why do you want to use it in your business? And I hope I'm answering the question. It's really kind of tying it into, what your business needs are. And that's any tool. If you don't tie tools into your business needs, they're not very helpful. Yeah, I would say, that, maybe as kind of a bit of a wrap up is that I really and truthfully hope that folks who watch this, if you have questions about AI, if you have questions about applications, if you're wondering if, what if or how if or who if or whatever your question might be, by all means, please feel free to reach out and respond. One thing I'm very proud of is the 10,000 plus person network that I have. And I'd be happy to reach out to somebody and connect folks up. I do that on a weekly basis. Literally, I average about 75 connections a year, where I just connect people up that has nothing to do with me. It's just hey, this person has a question about XYZ. You know a lot about XYZ. Let's connect you up. So I would strongly encourage people I guess in the comment section. I'm still somewhat new to this whole podcast game, but by all means, feel free in the comment section to say, hey, I have a question about XYZ. If someone else doesn't immediately answer you off of that, I'll find somebody who can answer your question. Literally, and there's just probably 100 different questions that people might have. So, and by all means, feel free to, I'd love to have you subscribe and continue to listen to our podcast going forward. This is all about being a leadership community, and I look forward to many more opportunities to continue to serve that leadership community. Thank you.